This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on India's leading role as a global commercial space launch service provider. The participants are Lieutenant General A.K. Bhatt, retired, Director General, Indian Space Association, and Omvesh Upadhyay, AIR correspondent.
India's space-based services over the years have grown in multitudes. Many new applications are being developed worldwide to meet the growing users' demand and requirements. Indian activities are on a growth trajectory with huge commercial potential. Recently, OneWeb 18 mission that was launched by ISRO and New Space India Limited is one of the biggest commercial orders by India's premier space organization and the first using the LVM-3 rocket. And today, to discuss on India's rise as a leading commercial service provider in the space industry, we are joined by Lieutenant General A.K. Bhatt, Director General, Indian Space Association. Welcome to the program, General.
Thank you.
General, to begin the discussion, I want to take your views on how do you see the recently launched LMV-3 mission and how this launch tells the story of India's self-reliance in the space sector. And can we say that it is a reflection of India's leading role as a commercial space launch service provider?
Okay, I'll put things into the perspective, and firstly I would go a little back and would mention that one of the things our founding fathers did was allow our space sector to grow in India immediately after independence. While many felt this was a luxury of the very affluent and rich countries, the founding father, Dr. Sarabhai, thought that we could develop space and use it for the common man. And with that dream of using it for the common man, space development took place in India with the support, of course, of the countries which had an advanced space program like USA, Russia, France. All of them did help us at some point of time. But what happened was, when the peaceful nuclear explosions were carried out and very tight restrictions were put on technologies to come to India, it became a tough time for the space sector, but it was also a blessing because we had to find solutions within the country. And that resulted in creating Atmanirbharta, which has resulted in development of two excellent launch vehicles called the PSLV and the GSLV.
General, in the context of this mission, if we talk, how do you see the emergence of India as the frontline space tech nation of the world?
In June 2020, our Prime Minister took a historical decision and he decided to open space to the private sector. It is after that, and one of the results of that NSIL, the New Space India Limited company, was created, and it is through them that this launch of ISRO of the GSLV LMV-3 has taken place, and 72 satellites were launched for OneWeb, 36 in October and 36 just yesterday. And the total money earned by this was 1,000 crores. We see this as an opportunity for our workhorses being used commercially much more and by many other countries.
So, General, we were talking about how India is making a stride in the space industry with its policy or continuous efforts. Here, for the listeners' information, also want to understand from you how important GSLV Mark III rocket is and how it is different from the PSLV rockets.
Okay. I will definitely tell you, PSLV, which was, the full form is Polar Satellite Launch Vehicles. It was primarily made for launching satellites in the sun synchronous orbit, that is the polar orbit, for a height of about 600 kilometers. And it could launch about 1,750 kgs in this orbit of low Earth orbit. Now, the GSLV is an advanced and developed form of it, including having a cryogenic engine in the third stage. It is bigger in size. For example, PSLV was 44 meters. The GSLV is 51.73 meters. It has a larger capacity to carry, like it can carry 2,250 kg to the geosynchronous orbit and 6,000 kg, nearly 3 times and more, to the low Earth orbit. So this is a far bigger rocket which has been launched now to launch 36 satellites together, and it is primarily aimed to have the INSAT class of communication satellites to be launched.
And General, even the Prime Minister talked about this when he said that how the entire nation stands with ISRO and the scientist community whenever they work on a space program. Last year he said,
आज भारत में हमारी जिन सफलताओं ने करोड़ों देशवासियों को प्रेरणा दी, उन्हें आत्मविश्वास दिया, उनमें हमारी स्पेस उपलब्धियों का विशेष योगदान है। इसरो जब कोई रॉकेट लॉन्च करता है, कोई अभियान अंतरिक्ष में भेजता है, तो पूरा देश उससे जुड़ जाता है, गर्व महसूस करता है, देश उसके लिए प्रार्थनाएं करता है, और जब वो सफल होता है तो हर देशवासी आनंद, उमंग और गर्व से उसकी अभिव्यक्ति करता है, और उस सफलता को हिंदुस्तान का हर नागरिक खुद की सफलता मानता है। और अगर कहीं कुछ अनहोनी हो जाए, अकल्पनीय हो गया, तो भी देश अपने वैज्ञानिकों के साथ खड़े होकर उनका हौसला बढ़ाता है।
India is now planning to permit a notable percentage of FDI, foreign direct investment, in the space sector. That will open opportunities for international firms to gain market entry. Sir, what impact will it have on the space economy?
Presently, FDI, whatever in the satellite manufacturing sector is there, is not by the direct method. It is by government approvals, but a new policy is being planned by the government, which is there at the highest level to be decided, which would be more liberal, both for satellite manufacturing, downstream, for earth stations, and for launch vehicles. We are awaiting a more liberal policy, which will provide more funds internationally for the private space sector, and especially for startups in India.
When we talk about India and we know that there's a young population that have tremendous potential in them, how can India take advantage of the local market conditions like the talent pool, low labor cost, engineering services to benchmark a cost competitive industry?
So what we have, the pluses today is we have got a motivated, educated, ready to be trained manpower. There's a large interest in the private sector among young people, and this has manifested that ever since the government declared their intent to open space sector, that is in 2020, we now have 140 new startups. And some of our startups which came up early, one of them, Skyroot, has, as you would be knowing, has launched the suborbital rocket. There are three more companies who have made their own satellites and have launched them. In fact, one of our companies would be launching a constellation of 36 satellites in the hyperspectral domain very soon. And there is another company, Agnikul, waiting to launch a rocket engine made by 3D technology. So one, our legacy of space which the ISRO has brought, combined with manpower which has a scientific bent. And thirdly, the overall lower costs in India provide a great opportunity not only to provide space services within the country, but internationally.
And sir, you have mentioned about startups, and my next question is on the same line, that now when many startups and industries have started making launch vehicles and satellite, how can it help the Indian space industry to reach newer heights?
I am very confident that the new revolution of space, and we being international global players commercially, would be led by our startups. The energy they have, the new technologies they are bringing into the market, and the passion they have, they are going to take India into the new orbit of the global space economy. And like the few examples I have already told you, it is being led by Pixel, Dhruva, Bellatrix, Digantara, and many more, and Agnikul.
And General, my next question is regarding the policy updates. In order to enhance utilization and maximize benefits from the space assets, India proposed to change the approach from supply-based model to demand-based model. Now the New Space India Limited is acting as the aggregator of user requirements and obtains commitment. So General, what is the significance of this transformation?
Previously, ISRO used to work out that what would all the ministries require, and thereafter they would launch a communication satellite or a remote sensing satellite, and the outcomes of that were provided to various ministries. But now what has changed is an example, and the best example is GSAT-24, which was launched and its entire transponder capacity was already bought by Tata. That is for DTH. So when this satellite GSAT-24 was launched, it has been the outcomes of it, that is the transponder capacity of it, was already bought by Tata to be used by DTH. So this is what the new model is. It is based on demand of the industry and not a supply-based model where firstly the supply is given and somebody picks it up. A more efficient model commercially.
And General, to add in this conversation, earlier you were mentioning about Atmanirbharta. My next question is on the same line, that the space industry is a niche sector with several global pockets for vendors of specialized products and services. Now, to what extent our Atmanirbharta can make us self-sufficient in terms of supply chain and mitigate some of the inherent supplier risk and solve single vendor problems?
One thing I would say is, like I said, we have attained a lot of Atmanirbharta because of the restrictions which were put on us after the peaceful nuclear explosions. But that said, in the world of space, there are some high-end technologies which would still be required to be imported. But yes, the larger part, and like I said, the new small rockets, the SSLV has been already made by ISRO, and also Agnikul and Skyroot are making their small rockets. Similarly, in satellites also, we have started manufacturing most of the components and the satellite bus in India. We have a great capacity to be Atmanirbhar, but yes, for certain critical elements, maybe some kind of requirement will continue. But that happens, for some time it would happen before we are even able to overcome that.
And sir, what's your say on Defence Space Agency?
As you are well aware, the war from the domains of land, air and sea has now transposed to two very important domains, and they are the space and cyber. Any nation, for its security, has to pay attention to the domain of space. In India also, and we have an advantage that we have a very well developed science space program, and usage of this to provide enhanced capabilities to our defense services will always be done. And in this, a recent initiative taken by our defense ministry has been that they, after interaction with the private industry in India, have thrown 75 which are called the Defense Space Challenges, which were announced by our Honorable Prime Minister at the Defense Expo in Ahmedabad in the month of October. So what it has been done is new 75 challenges of what could be developed for the future for the defense has been given to the private sector, and there have been a lot of active interest from startups and others to develop future technologies, what would be required by the defense forces.
So can we say that gone are the days when India have to follow or were following the West, but now India is leading the world, be it tech innovation, space industry, everywhere?
Yes, we are one of the primary players in the world over, and we are doing everything to ensure that we do not lag behind in the space domain.
And General, in the concluding segment of our program, I would like to know from you, now seeing the public-private partnership in India in the space sector, how you see that? What's your take on this?
We see the whole global space market, which is about 400 billion. We just have 2.3% of it. And by this historical decision of the government to open the space sector, we see an opportunity for this to grow at least 4 to 5 times, and we having a larger share of the global market, global space market, space economy as it grows.
And that's very insightful. Thank you so much, General, for joining us today on All India Radio.
My pleasure.
You were listening to a discussion on India's leading role as a global commercial space launch service provider. The participants were Lieutenant General A.K. Bhatt, retired, Director General, Indian Space Association, and Omvesh Upadhyay, AIR correspondent. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 928-909-4044.